tranny's an original 47 tranny, and I put a Paco kicker cover on it for now. As you probably, people that know old bikes know that the inside the kicker cover area tends to crack. And with the way I ride the piss out of this thing, I wanted to save my original kicker cover, so I put that aside and just threw a heavy-duty Paco on it for now, take it to abuse. Pipes came from Paco. Had to modify them a little bit to fit how I wanted them to. The oil tank's actually a shorter stock style oil tank that's a little bit higher. It doesn't come down as low as a normal one was. Give me a little more room there. Fender was a hinged, full skirted fender. Normally the hinge would be right around this area, and I actually, when I build a bike, I really like to keep my end of my fender and my axle pretty close in alignment. That just to me is a good, kind of a good point. Anything farther than that, and, I usually am cutting them down. So I cut that off even further back than the hinge, put a little bar stock on it. Hole drilled this with my CNC here. I pretty much laid my lines out on a CAD program, laid the fender on its side. I had to pull some of the rails out so it sat low enough, and then I just hit go and the machine went through and cut all the holes for me. Tail lights from Crime Scene Choppers. It's kind of an old microphone style repop. I used a lot of vintage kind of antique brass on this bike, so this had a polished brass face. Now you can see it's pretty beat up and worn in, so it's looking good. All my brass hardware, nothing's polished shiny, and let it get kind of old. My Good Luck knocker here, this is a Chinese door pull, and all those symbols on it are to ward off evil spirits and bring good luck. So instead of running the little gremlin bells like everybody uses, I decided to start running these on my bikes. I put one on every bike I build. Now you see that one's got one on the rear fender. These pegs came, these are one-offs from Chopper Dave out of California. He had pegs that were glory bound or cheat death. Well, since my bike was death or glory, I needed them to flip-flop his casting for one set just so I'd get the death on the left and the glory on the right. And he was kind enough to do it, sent them to me, and gave them to me for free just to put them on the bike, so that was pretty sweet. Change Your Luck, Ride a Knuck. These are some good friends of mine, Matt and Carl Olson at Carl Cycle Supply in Aberdeen, South Dakota. These guys actually is where I got these chrome tanks from. This bike did have a set of black tanks on it, and the whole bike was painted by Sprockets Paint out of Prior Lake. But what had happened is, on my way to Sturgis this year, I got to Matt and Carl's in Aberdeen. That was, a good 350, 400 mile ride the first day on our way to Sturgis. One of my tank, my left side tank, the mount broke on the bottom, so my tank was rattling and making noise, and got to their house, and we tried bungeeing it up and all that, and they're like, that's not going to last. You're gonna, if you got to ride this all the way to Sturgis, you had to hand back, it's going to end up cracking, and you're going to be spilling gas over the place. So they pulled these off. They got, man, those guys have probably 15 or 16 knuckleheads there. It's knuckle paradise. And on the wall, they have a wall of all old original tanks. And he had these original 47, these are the 47-year tanks too. They're a 1-year only tank that had been chrome plated by a friend of theirs way back in the 60s. And he pulled these off, said, I'll tell you what, you can run these till you get your tanks fixed or whatever and take them. So that was kind of a neat gesture, because these tanks are worth probably about $4,000 alone, just the way they are in the beat up shape they're in. So it was an honor to get them from them and to run them. So now the bike's name is Elvis, because she's got the shiny jacket on there. One of the funny things about this tank, you notice this dent here? That was actually done, and as if you can see that, it was done by a fist. And his Matt and Carl's friend who owned this bike that these tanks are on had a few beers one night and the bike wouldn't start. He got mad, and they were there and saw him. He punched the tank so hard that he dented in the tank, and I guess he messed his hand up pretty good. But it's kind of a neat story, and people see, like, oh, what happened? It's like, well, old Harold, I got mad, wouldn't start, and beat on the tank. But then we got the Hollywood bars on here. These are called the Hollywood bars with the cross member. Back in the old days, when guys would flat track and hill climb these bikes, they were basically, these are their everyday riders. They'd get them to the top of or bottom of the hill, strip off shit that wasn't going to make it go faster, and they'd go up the hill. Well, these bars were all, brazed in. A lot of times you'd break a bar or it would come loose while you're halfway up the hill, so they came up with this Hollywood bar cross brace to help give you a little more rigidity, so when you're racing up a hill you don't lose your handlebars and go tumbling down the hill. The seat is actually an original Army bike seat pan. I had restored a 42 WLA Army bike a couple years back, and it came with an extra seat pan, the original one that was all rusted and didn't have any covering on. So I sent it to a good friend of mine, Christian Marsh of Exian Leather. gave him the general idea of what I wanted, and then just let him have creative flow on it, and this is what he came up with, which is pretty cool. The Death or Glory, I built this bike, called it Death or Glory. It's kind of a tribute to our forefathers, guys that used to, run these bikes to work every day, 7 days a week. But after they get off work, they'd head to the hill, and they'd be up there hill climbing and racing these things. It's just because it was a passion of theirs. So I named it Death or Glory to kind of tribute our forefathers. The seat itself, the roses here represent my wife, who's been real understanding in all my vintage bike addictions here. Got the 3 big stars, one for each of my boys, and my company logo here, and 47 Knuckle. He did a real good job on that seat pan. Up here a little more, this is an original 1 year only 47 speedometer. That's one of the things about the 47 Knucklehead is it was the last year they made them, and it had a lot of 1 year only parts, because what they were doing is they were prototyping some things, looking at their ideas for what they were going to do with their 48 panhead when they started the panhead model. So a lot of stuff they did, they tried it on this bike, used it and it was fine, but then they just decided let's change a little more for the panhead. So when you want to restore a 47, you got a lot of 1 year only parts, which means you go to a swap meet, people know, hey, this speedometer, $1,800, or this fender, this set of gas tanks, it's just crazy. So it's pretty hard to make them a true restored classic unless you got a deep pocketbook, and that's kind of why this is my lifelong project. Being I have so much original stuff on it, someday I want this to be a stock bike. But for now, it's just kind of my piece together bobber, and as the years progress, maybe I find something that get a little bit of a deal on, I'll buy it, and then eventually put this thing back to looking like a right off the showroom floor original bike. On this side, we're running an open belt. I run Suicide on all my bikes, and this is the way I run them too. This is actually a slop top tranny, we call it. It's not a ratchet lid, so you don't click and click and click. This thing actually just slops through the gears all the way. There's no real stopping point. You just have to feel when you're in gear. And that was set up to have a hand tank shifter on here. So with the tank shifter, you have slots where you jam it in the first, go over, jam it, and it would tell you how far to go, so you knew you're in gear. Well, I eliminated that and just ran it as a jockey here, and I kept the slop top on it. And it's kind of fun for me. Nobody really ever wants to ride it either because of that, but to me, I like it. And this would have been an original rocker clutch, and I eliminated the spring mechanism to make it a Suicide clutch, and then I actually cut the front foot right off, so it's just a heel shift now. So it's a heel clutch. I just use my heel, jam the clutch, and then hit a gear, and it helps. It's real quick because I race this bike. I drag race it on the strip when I get a chance. I do flat tracking with it. Really ride the heck out of it. So that's just a little way for me to be quicker on the punch there. And I'm happy to say I'm undefeated drag racing on it. I beat a 49 pan down at the Smokeout, North Carolina, and then the next race a 73 shovel. And that shovel, the guy had a hand clutch foot shift, so technically you'd think he would have smoked me, but I beat him by about a bike length, so I was pretty proud of that. Headlights, another crime scene choppers to match the rear. It's got laser lights in it, halogen bulbs, so it's real bright. 16-inch wheels, front and rear, old Star Hub style drum brakes that don't work worth a shit, so hopefully I never get cut off because I'll be slamming into whoever cut me off. And yeah, that's about it. She's a collection of parts. It's built with a lot of heart and soul. I love this bike. You can see how dirty and ratty and nasty it looks after only 2 years. 2 years ago it was shiny and clean and looked nice. This is me though. This is me. I ride them. I don't trailer them. I don't take sandpaper and scrub on it to make it look beat up or used. I ride it. 8,000 miles last summer on this thing, and this is kind of what they look like when you actually ride them. So those guys with them bikes that are always perfect and spotless, they're not enjoying them for the right reasons. This is what it's all about, getting on them and riding them. So this will be with me forever, hopefully.